Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thank you, Secretary Powell, for your testimony here today and for your dedicated service to our country. As you know, I have long been a personal admirer of yours, and thank you again for your commitment and service. Secretary Armitage, the administration has asked that you be allowed to testify tomorrow in place of Condoleezza Rice. No one could suggest that her role is not central to our inquiry and that her knowledge is different from yours, as she was a direct liaison between the President and the CIA and the FBI on issues directly relevant to our inquiry. That is why the Commission unanimously requested that Dr. Rice appear. The only reason the administration has advanced for refusing to make Dr. Rice available is a separation of powers argument, that presidential advisors ought not have to appear before the Congress. I would call to your attention a report by the Congressional Research Service dated April 5th, 2002, well before the controversy arose about Dr. Rice's appearance. In that report, there are many precedents involving presidential advisors. Lloyd Cutler, counsel to President Carter, testified, came up to Congress to answer questions. Zbigniew Brzezinski, assistant to the President for National Security Affairs, appeared in 1980. Samuel Berger appeared as a Deputy Assistant to the President for National Security in May of 1994. He reappeared as in his function as National Security Advisor in September of 1997. John Podesta, Chief of Staff to President Clinton, and several others in the Clinton administration have appeared before congressional committees. And I may add that after this report was prepared, Governor Ridge appeared before two committees of the Congress. So I would ask Mr. Armitage, without any disparagement of your service or of your knowledge, that when you leave here today, you advise the administration of this report. I've got an extra copy for you to take with you. And we ask again in all seriousness that Dr. Rice appear. Secretary Powell, let me ask you this. I'd like to turn your attention to the immediate events after 9/11. You were in Peru on that day. You flew back. It must have been a dreadfully painful experience on several levels, not the least of which was your inability to communicate during that long trip back. Thereafter, you met with members of the Cabinet and the President at Camp David. And my friend Secretary Lehman has brought up the subject of Iraq with Secretary Albright. You and I met with other members of the Commission on the 21st of January of this year. On that occasion, you advised us of a full-day meeting on Saturday, September 15th, in which the question of striking Iraq was discussed. You advised us that the Deputy Secretary of Defense advanced the argument that Iraq was the source of the problem and that the United States should launch an attack on Iraq forthwith. You advised us that Secretary Wolfowitz was unable to justify that position. Have I accurately described your recollection of what occurred?
There was a meeting of the National Security council that Mr. Wolf was also attended on that day at Camp David, as you described. There was a full day of discussions on the situation that we found ourselves in, who was responsible for it, and as part of that full day of discussion, Iraq was discussed, and Secretary Wolfowitz raised the issue of whether or not Iraq should be considered for action during this time. And after fully discussing all sides of the issue, as I think it is appropriate for such a group to do, the President made a tentative decision that afternoon. I would call it a tentative decision that we ought to focus on Afghanistan, because it was clear to us at that point that al-Qaeda was responsible, the Taliban was harboring al-Qaeda, and that should be the objective of any action we were to take. He did not dismiss Iraq as a problem, but he said, first things first, we will examine all of the sources of terrorism directed against the United States and the civilized world, but we'll start with Afghanistan. Now, he confirmed that over the next couple of days in meetings we had with him. And when he came back down from Camp David and we met on Monday, he made it a firm decision and gave us all instructions as to how to proceed. And then he announced that to the nation later in the week. And so he heard arguments, as he should, from all members of his administration on the different alternatives. I think this is what the President would expect us to do. And he decided on Afghanistan.
Excuse me. You have characterized Secretary Wolfowitz.
This last question. Just time.
Secretary Wolfowitz's position as whether or not we ought to attack Iraq. Is it not the case that he advocated for an attack on Iraq?
He presented the case for Iraq and whether or not it should be considered along with Afghanistan at this time. I can't recall whether he said instead of Afghanistan. We all knew that Afghanistan was where al-Qaeda was.
Was there any concrete basis upon which that recommendation was founded, in your view? Attack Iraq for 9/11.
Secretary Wolfowitz was deeply concerned about Iraq being a source of terrorist activity. You will have a chance to talk to him directly about it.
I've asked for your view, with all due respect, Secretary Powell.
With all due respect, I don't think I should characterize what Mr. Wolfowitz's views were.
No, I asked for your view. In your view, was there a basis?
My view was that we listened to all the arguments at Camp David that day, and Mr. Wolfowitz felt that Iraq should be considered as part of this problem having to do with terrorism, and he wanted us to consider whether or not it should be part of any military action that we were getting ready to take. We all heard the argument fully. We asked questions back and forth, and where the President came down was that Afghanistan was the place that we had to attack, because the world and the American people would not understand if we didn't go after the source of the 9/11 terrorists.
I'm out of time.